Every year, wars and the preparation for them make the world poorer, more dangerous, and more divided, except for a very specific, powerful few. This isn't a conspiracy. It's a global economic architecture. A system so vast, so entrenched, that it now commands a staggering $2.7 trillion annually. To grasp that number, try to count to 2.7 trillion. If you counted one number every second without sleep, you'd finish in over Baowen Wu 10 years. That is the scale of the resources we collectively pour, every single year, into the machinery of defense, deterrence, and destruction. This is the $2.7 trillion war economy. And I want to know, where are you watching this from right now? And what time is it where you are? Put it in the comments. If this global system impacts your safety, your taxes, and your future, hit like, share this to pull back the curtain, and subscribe to understand how the world really works. Let's start with the shock. That $2.7 trillion, the global military expenditure, now surpasses what the entire world spends on primary and secondary education and public health care combined. Let that sink in. We, as a global civilization, have collectively decided that the industry of potential violence is a greater priority than the foundational industries of human development, teaching our children and healing our sick. This isn't a judgment born in a vacuum. It's a fact etched in budget ledgers from Washington to Beijing, from Moscow to Riyadh. This money doesn't just vanish into a void. It flows through a highly sophisticated, interlocked ecosystem of Winarza triangle of power that forms the bedrock of the war economy. At the top of this pyramid, you have the governments. Beneath them, the arms companies. And forming the foundational layer, the banks and contractors. This is the Iron Triangle. And its logic is self-perpetuating. Governments are both the primary customers and the chief regulators. Their motive is ostensibly security, a concept that is infinitely elastic and permanently urgent. A nation's security can never be fully achieved. It can only be managed. This creates a perpetual demand. The political cycle thrives on short-term wins and public fear. A terrorist attack, a rival's new missile test, a geopolitical crisis, these are immediate catalysts for budget increases. Politicians who vote for defense spending are seen as strong on defense, a potent label. Those who question it risk being labeled naive or weak. The budget process itself is often opaque, with black budgets for intelligence and special operations hidden from public scrutiny. But the government rarely builds anything itself anymore. The era of massive state-owned arsenals is largely over. Instead, it funnels taxpayer money to the second corner of the triangle, the private arms companies. This is where the abstraction of defense spending becomes concrete profit. We're not talking about 1,000 small workshops. We're talking about a concentrated oligopoly. A handful of corporate giants: Lockheed Martin, RTX Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, BAE Systems, General Dynamics in the West, Rostec Norinco in the East dominate the landscape. Their business model is unique and incredibly resilient. They operate in a market where failure can be more profitable than success. A weapons system that goes over budget, misses deadlines, or underperforms rarely gets canceled. Why? Because of sunk costs and the fear of capability gaps. The government has already invested billions. Pulling the plug means admitting waste and leaving a strategic need unmet. So, more money is poured in. This is the cost-plus contract mentality, where profits are often a percentage of the total cost, incentivizing bloated budgets. But these companies don't just sell products. They sell a doctrine. They invest heavily in lobbying and political influence. In the United States, the defense sector spends hundreds of millions annually on lobbying. Employing more lobbyists than there are members of Congress, They make strategic campaign donations and ensure high-paying jobs are located in key congressional districts. The result? A powerful bipartisan political bloc whose interest is the continuous flow of defense dollars. The departure of a senior Pentagon official to a cushy VP job at a defense contractor, the revolving door, is not a scandal. It's a career path. This symbiosis between the government purchaser and the corporate seller is the engine of the system. But even this engine needs fuel. It needs capital. Enter the third corner, the banks and the contractors. The major global investment banks, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and others are deeply embedded in this economy. They underwrite bonds for governments to fund their military budgets. They provide loans and lines of credit to the arms giants for massive research and development projects and production scaling. They facilitate mergers and acquisitions, allowing defense companies to grow larger and more monopolistic. They profit from the trading of shares in these corporations, whose stock prices often rise on the news of geopolitical instability or new contracts. The financialization of the war economy means that your pension fund, your mutual fund, likely has holdings in these companies. You are, indirectly, a shareholder in the business of war. Whether you know it or not, beyond the banks is a vast, often invisible, ecosystem of contractors. This isn't just about building jets and tanks. It's about the logistics, the companies that supply fuel, food, and housing for armies. It's about the technology firms providing cybersecurity, surveillance software, and AI for autonomous systems. It's about the construction giants building bases abroad and the consultants who provide analysis and strategy. This diffuse network normalizes the economy. It's not just merchants of death in shadowy boardrooms. It's a respected IT firm providing cloud storage for drone data, a catering company serving mess halls, a trucking firm moving supplies. This diffusion makes the entire system more resilient and less visible, weaving the war economy into the very fabric of the mainstream economy. To see this iron triangle in action, we need to look at real-world examples. Let's start with the United States, which accounts for nearly 40% of the entire world's military spending, over $900 billion annually. The U.S. model is the most advanced expression of this triangle. The Pentagon's budget is a geopolitical instrument and a domestic jobs program. A congressperson will fight fiercely for a submarine or fighter jet contract not only for national security, but because it supports 10,000 jobs in their home state. The lobbying power is immense. Companies like Lockheed Martin, maker of the F-35 jet, the most expensive weapons program in history at over $1.70 trillion lifetime costs, have mastered this dance. The F-35 is produced in parts across 45 states, creating a political constituency in nearly every corner of the country that benefits from its continuation, regardless of its well-documented technical problems. Here, the line between national defense and national industrial policy is utterly blurred. The threat is global terrorism, then a great power competition with China and Russia. The response is a budget increase, and the money flows through the triangle to shareholders, executives, and employees. Now, contrast this with Germany. For decades post-Cold War, Germany maintained a relatively low military profile, a culture of restraint. Overnight, the German government announced a €100 billion special fund for the Bundeswehr armed forces and committed to permanently spending more than 2% of GDP on defense. This triggered a gold rush. Rheinmetall, a German arms manufacturer, saw its stock price multiply. The government signed huge deals for American F-35s, Israeli missile defense systems, and its own domestic projects. The German example shows how quickly the war economy can activate and expand. A dormant corner of the triangle, the government's demand function, was switched to maximum. And the other two corners, companies, banks responded instantly. The political consensus shifted from militarization is bad to defense is our highest duty in a matter of weeks, proving the latent power of the structure. But the model isn't exclusive to wealthy nations. Look at Pakistan. Here, the military is not just a security institution. It is a colossal economic conglomerate, through vast networks of foundations, trusts, and holding companies. The Pakistani military controls interests in everything from cereal factories, banks, and real estate to road construction and wedding halls. This is the war economy internalized. The institution responsible for national defense is also a dominant player in the commercial marketplace. Using its privileged position, land holdings, and tax advantages to outcompete civilian businesses. Its budget is opaque, barely scrutinized by parliament. For Pakistan, the question isn't just about spending on security. It's about a military that has become a self-sustaining economic empire, where its corporate profits help fund its military needs, creating a closed loop of power and money entirely separate from the civilian economy. This is the iron triangle fused into a single, formidable entity. We have traced the flow. From the political decision in a capital, to the corporate headquarters awarding bonuses, to the bank clearing the transaction, to the subcontractor hiring workers. It is a closed, self-justifying system. Its language is one of eternal threat, necessity, and high technology. It speaks of deterrence, capability gaps, and national pride. It rarely speaks of opportunity cost: the hospitals not built, the universities not funded, the green energy. The $2.7 trillion war economy is not a static monument. It is a living, adapting organism, and its most alarming feature is its relentless drive to find new frontiers, new threats, and new markets. Having saturated the traditional domains of land, sea, and air, its gaze is now turning upward and inward, to the orbital realm above us and the digital landscape within our infrastructure. This is no longer just about tanks and fighter jets. The next growth stocks are in cyberweapons, artificial intelligence for lethal decision-making, and the militarization of space. The Iron Triangle is betting on a future where war is not just a matter of territory, but of data, connectivity, and perception. The digital battlefield is a bonanza. Every nation's fear of a cyber Pearl Harbor, a catastrophic attack on its power grid, financial systems, or healthcare infrastructure has opened a fiscal floodgate. Governments are scrambling to establish cyber commands, not as branches of their IT departments, but as full-scale military divisions. Private arms companies, once focused on metallurgy and propulsion, now boast major cybersecurity and offensive cyberware divisions. Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and Lockheed Martin are voracious acquirers of Silicon Valley startups specializing in encryption, intrusion detection, and data analytics. Banks are financing this digital arms race. Selling sophisticated surveillance and breach capabilities to governments worldwide. This domain is perfect for the war economy. The threat is invisible, omnipresent, and constantly evolving, justifying perennial, opaque budgets. A malware suite is cheaper to develop than a jet, but can be sold at a premium because its effects are so potentially devastating. But cyber is just the gateway. The true quantum leap is the integration of artificial intelligence. The war economy is funding a high-stakes race for autonomous weapons systems. Killer robots or lethal autonomous weapons systems laws. The selling point is efficiency and risk reduction, a drone that can identify and engage. A target without a human in the loop means no pilot in danger. It also means decisions compressed to microseconds. The research budgets flowing from the Pentagon's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, China's equivalent units, and others into machine learning, computer vision, and swarm robotics are immense. Companies like Palantir, Anduril, and Shield AI are pioneering this new market, arguing that AI is the only way to keep pace with modern threats. Yet, this creates a terrifying feedback loop. To train an AI for combat, you need data simulated and real. The pursuit of better AI becomes a rationale for more surveillance, more drone deployments, more data harvesting from battlefields, which in turn fuels the demand for more advanced AI to process it all. The moral and strategic decisions are being outsourced to algorithms funded by contracts and developed in corporate labs, further blurring the lines of accountability and escalating the speed at which conflict can spiral. Then, there is the final frontier: space. For decades, space was a largely peaceful domain, governed by treaties. No longer. The U.S. Space Force, established in 2019, is not a sci-fi novelty. It is the bureaucratic embodiment of a new military domain. Russia and China have their own space forces. The focus is on space control, protecting vital assets like GPS. This means new weapon systems, ground-based anti-satellite missiles, directed energy weapons, and orbital inspector satellites that could grapple or sabotage others. Lockheed Martin, SpaceX, and Blue Origin are now defense contractors in this arena. The war economy is actively creating a market for space-based conflict, turning the orbital commons into a potential war zone. The terrifying logic is familiar. We must militarize space to protect our assets from their militarization of space. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy with trillions of dollars of potential contracts written into its DNA. This expansion into cyber AI and space demonstrates the system's brilliant, terrifying adaptability. But it also exposes its central, corrosive contradiction. The stated purpose is protection. The business model, however, demands perpetual demand. For the triangle to thrive, there must always be a plausible threat, an arms race to win, a technological gap to close. This creates an irresistible incentive to overstate threats, to engage in provocative actions that spur rivals to build up, and to ensure that peace and genuine diplomatic resolution are seen not as ultimate goals, but as business risks. This is the security dilemma weaponized by capitalism. Every defensive move by one nation is seen as an offensive threat by another, prompting a buildup which justifies the first nation's next buildup. The economy feeds on this cycle. It is not a conspiracy of warmongers. It is the emergent property of a system where immense profit and power are tied to the premise of impending danger. Let's examine the human and social cost of this diverted wealth. The $2.7 trillion figure is an abstraction. Let's make it concrete. That money represents opportunity cost on a civilization scale. For the cost of one new U.S. Columbia-class nuclear submarine, $9 billion. You could fund the tuition of over 200,000 students through 4-year public universities. The global annual military expenditure could cover the estimated $300 billion yearly cost to end world hunger for 9 years. It could fund the entire global transition to renewable energy, the greatest existential security threat of our time, multiple times over. Instead, we have chosen a different priority. The schools lacking resources, the crumbling public infrastructure, the underfunded pandemic preparedness, the slow pace of climate adaptation, these are not separate crises. They are the direct, measurable results of a global budget that has, consciously or not, chosen missiles over medicine, submarines over schools, and surveillance over sustainability. Furthermore, this economy corrupts the very idea of innovation. Some of history's greatest technological leaps, VS jet engines, have military origins. The argument is that defense spending drives innovation, but this is increasingly a myth. Today, the cutting edge in AI, biotech, and material science is often in the civilian commercial sector. The war economy doesn't necessarily drive innovation. It captures it. It uses its massive risk-tolerant budgets to divert the brightest minds and most powerful technologies away from solving human problems and toward mastering human destruction. It creates a brain drain from public good to private, defense-contracted gain. So we return to the brutal, final question. After tracing the money from government budgets to corporate profits, from banks to contractors, and seeing its expansion into our digital lives and outer space, we must ask, is this protection or is it a business? The uncomfortable truth is that it is both, and that is the problem. It is protection as a business. The product sold is security. But the metrics of success for the business are financial, stock price, annual revenue, contract wins, market share. A world at perfect peace would be a market crash for this industry. Therefore, the system's incentives are not aligned with creating a world without war, but with managing a world of perpetual, manageable conflict. It is a business that thrives on the idea of war, even when the guns are silent. It requires us to see other nations not as partners in a shared human project, but as eternal rivals and existential threats. It militarizes our imagination, making the next war seem inevitable, and the next. Weapons system, our only salvation. This is not a call for naive disarmament in a dangerous world. Deterrence has a role. The world is a perilous place. But when the scale of investment so grotesquely outweighs all other human endeavors, when the institutions meant to protect us become self-perpetuating financial empires, and when the logic of escalation becomes embedded in our economic system, we must recognize that we are no longer simply maintaining security. We are feeding a machine whose ultimate function may no longer be to ward off war, but to ensure its own eternal necessity. This is the $2.7 trillion question. What do you think? Is this colossal global endeavor the necessary price of our safety in a dangerous world, the foundation of a fragile peace? Or have we built a business so powerful that it now shapes our politics, our economies, and our futures, locking us into a cycle of fear and expenditure from which there seems no exit? The answer isn't just in a comment section. It's in the budgets we accept and the priorities we demand. Let me know your thoughts below, like, share, and subscribe if this made you see the world differently. The first step to changing anything is understanding the system.